Okay, so welcome to this video where we're going to be solving the portfolio management problem which we formulated in the I'm sorry, which we formulated in the previous video. We wrote the decision variable, the objective function, and constraints. We're going to take this and we're going to put it into Excel and solve it. So that's the plan for this video. So let me open Excel. There. Right there. So we have 10 decision variables here. So we know what our decision variables are. So okay. We have Unidad Stocks, CC's Restaurant, First General REIT, First General REIT, Metropolitan Electric, Unidad Bonds, Louisville Transit, Realty Partners, T-bill account, a money market fund, and saver certificate. And I'm going to have the left hand side and the right hand side stuff. Okay. It's obviously going to get much bigger than usual because let's begin with the decision variables as usual. Our decision variables are going to be here. Okay, then the objective. Okay, so let's write the objective. So you have 15%, 17%, 17.5%, 11.8%, 12.2%, 22%. I must have something. 15%, 17%, 17.5, 11.8, 12.2, then 12. Then 22, then 9.6, 10.5, and 12.6. So these are all the returns that we have. Okay, so that's the coefficients for the objective function. Then the constraints. So let's begin with the liquidity factor. So now a few things to keep in mind. What I'm going to do is I am going to group similar constraints together in the sense that I'm going to begin with the equal to constraint here. There's only one equal to constraint, so I'm going to begin with that. Then you have some greater than or equal to constraints and some less than or equal to constraints. You'll notice that they are way more less than or equal to constraints than greater than or equal to constraints. So I'm going to write all the less than or equal to constraints first, and then I'm going to write the greater than or equal to constraints, right? So let's begin with the equal to constraint first. The equal to constraint says that sum 1, the sum of all of the percentages needs to add up to be equal to 1, right? Okay. Okay, so sum has to be 1, and then we have the risk factor constraint, because remember I'm not writing the liquidity factor because that's a greater than or equal to constraint. So let's write the risk factor constraint. You know what? Maybe we'll write the greater than or equal to constraint. So we'll do the liquidity factor because there are fewer of them. So liquidity factor constraint. So let's do that. Yeah, sure. So let's do the liquidity factor constraints. Okay. So 100. You know what? I'm doing it this way. I should just go over file. Right. So 100, 100, 100, 195, 92, 79, 0. Realty Partners is 0. Then the T-bill account is 80. Money market fund is 100. And saver certificate is 0. This has to be greater than or equal to 65. So that's the liquidity factor constraint. Now if you look at the next greater than or equal to constraint, comes, they're all less and less. I'm sorry, there you go. You have to put at least $1,000 in the money market fund, and so let's do that first. So money market fund. So there's the money market fund, 400,000. So that's the coefficient. So 400,000 times MF. This has to be at least 1,000. Next, you have to put at least 90,000 in bonds. So 400,000 times the bond, the debt, the 3 debt instruments has to be at least 90,000. So 400,000 has to be at least 90,000. So this is the 1,000 in the money market fund. And 90,000 debt, right? And finally, you have to put at least 10,000 in T-bills. So remember, the reason why we are putting 400,000 everywhere is that we are multiplying the 400,000 with each of these variables. So you can distribute the 400,000 into the parenthesis, and the coefficient for each of these variables is 400,000, because remember, these variables are percentages. So let's say it's 10%. So you're saying that you're going to put 40,000 in Metropolitan Electric, say whatever the money in UB and LT. So you're saying that the total money has to add up to be at least 90,000. Okay, so those are my greater than or equal to constraints. Now let's write all the other constraints, which are, they are all less than or equal to constraints. So let's begin with the risk factor constraint. So the risk factor constraint right here. Let's put down the risk factor numbers: 60, 70, 75, 20, 30, 22, 50, 0, 10, 6. These are all the coefficients for the risk factor, and this has to be less than or equal to 55. That's the risk factor that you wanted. So that was the risk factor constraint. So that's the first less than or equal to constraint that you have. Then you say that you cannot put more than 60,000 in Unidide, right? So you cannot put more than 60,000 Unidide stocks or bonds. Right? So coefficient for Unidide stocks is 400, Unidide bonds is 400. So let's say that the total percentage in Unidide adds up to like 15%. You're saying 15% of 400,000 cannot exceed 60,000. Whatever this percentage adds up to be, that cannot exceed, times 400,000 cannot exceed 60,000. So that's basically what you're saying. That's Unidide constraint. And the next constraint on the list, they are the category constraint and individual stock constraints. So let's write the category constraint first. no more than 40,000. So you're saying that stocks have to be less than 40,000. So let's do stocks. So no, we're just doing 1, 1, 1 less than 40%. And bonds less than 40%. And real estate. And real estate is less than 40%. Okay. Next is bonds. And then of course real estate. For that it's First General REIT and Realty Partners together. This has to be less than 40%. Okay. Then we are going to write individual constraints for each of the different variables. I'm going to begin that here. I'm just going to go through this quickly. The only constraint that we don't have is the money market fund. So we're going to write the money market fund constraint next. And this has to be less than or equal to 20%. 20%, 20%. So 20% here, 20% here, 20% here, and 20% here. So these are all less than or equal to constraints. I'm going to write this. So this is where you will find that all the things that we did where we used the sum product functions and the dollar signs, they all come out to be useful here. You can see there are so many constraints. Maximum 20% in any investment. Right? So that's the constraint. So we have that constraint for every one of them except for the money market fund. So that's why I missed them. We didn't write the money market fund. They're all less than 20%. And then we have the saver certificate is less than 15%. That's the other. We cannot put more than 15% in the saver certificate. So I'm sorry, 15K. Right? So maximum 15K in saver certificate. So saver certificate is right here. $15,000. And there you go. So these are all our constraints. So we have the equal to constraint, the 4 greater than or equal to constraint, and the remaining bevy of less than or equal to constraints, the 15 less than or equal to constraints that we have. So now that we have written all of these constraints, so let's write the formulas, put them into the solver and solve them. So sum product formula. So we always write the sum product formula. We can, I'm going to choose the decision variables first, make them dollar signs, and then the objective. Copy the whole thing down, see. It makes our life so much easier standardizing these things. So we have one column for each variable. We write the coefficients, then we write the formula where you are multiplying the decision variables with the corresponding objective coefficients or the constraint coefficients, whichever they are. And there you go. So now that we have it, this is where our problem is basically housed, right? So this is where we have the objective, and these are all our constraints. Our decision variables are here, of course. So let's put this into the solver. So first, the objective is to maximize. So let's choose. That's where our objective is, L4, right? It's L4. And you want to maximize the objective, so that's good. The decision variables are right here. Changing variable cells, B2 to K2. I'm going to change this to linear programming. I'm going to add constraints. So because I grouped similar constraints together, I'm just going to add 3 constraints. Click on add. I'm going to write the equal to constraint first. Is equal to that. So that's my first equal to constraint. Then the 4 greater than or equal to constraints be greater than or equal to the right hand side of the greater than or equal to constraints. So L7 to L10 greater than or equal to N7 to N10. You know, click on N. So the less than or equal to constraints next. So these are all the left hand sides have to be less than or equal to the right hand side value. So L11 to L25 less than or equal to N11 to N25. Right? Now with this we are done, so we can click on solve and solve this problem. It can take a couple of seconds. There you go. It literally took about a couple of seconds, right? Okay. Now, one of the things that we could have done with the objective is we could have multiplied that with 400,000 to know exactly how much return we are going to get. So that is 400,000. That's good. Oops. There you go. Right. So that's our objective. So this is saying that don't invest any money in United stocks. Put 20% in CCs, 20% in First General REIT, nothing in Metropolitan Electric, 15% in United bonds, 18.5% in Louisville Transit, 20% in Realty Partners, 2.5% in T-bills, 0.25% in money market fund, and 3.75% in saver certificate. And the return will be 64,355. Now let's say that you want to calculate the actual value. So the you want to say decision variables in dollar values. So you can multiply each of these numbers here with 400,000. This will give you everything in dollar signs. Right? This will tell you how much you should invest in each dollar wise. Dollar sign. And there you go. That is the final solution right here. Nothing in United stocks. 80K in CCs and First General, nothing in Metropolitan Electric, 60 in United bonds, 74 in Louisville Transit, 80 in Realty Partners, 10,000 in T-bills, 1,000 in money market fund, and 15,000 in saver certificate. So with this investment, you will make a return of $64,355 a year. And that's the final answer. All right. Okay. I'll see you on the next video. Take care.